So stand up, right? Some of us in this group have been doing it for a long time. Some of us are brand new. We've never done it before. So basically the way that we're going to lay out this class between now and 10:30 is we're going to start with the basics of stand up, common questions that I get all the time on how to do it, how to craft material, all sorts of things. And then the last half of the class, we are going to do a brainstorming exercise to help us craft material from scratch. So those of you who have been doing stand-up for a while, you're going to come out of this with new material. Those who have never done stand-up before, you will also come out of this with new material. And basically what we're doing is we're just showing how easy it can be to write stand-up material, because a lot of people are very intimidated by the idea of doing comedy. The very first thing that people usually say to me when they come to my stand-up comedy class is, I don't know what to talk about because nothing funny has ever happened to me, right? They say things like, my life's not boring, but I can't really think of anything that's just laugh out loud funny that's ever happened to me that would be interesting to talk about as a stand-up set. And the wonderful thing about stand-up is that people don't actually want to hear about things funny that happen to you. They want to hear humor made out of the relatable things that have happened to you, if that makes sense. So that's why you never get on Netflix and you never hear people doing sets about like how much they have in their 401k and like how healthy their relationship is and how things are just going really well for them and they made it to work on time. You never hear those kinds of things in stand-up. What you hear is the bullshit that we got to deal with every day, right? So if you can't think of something in your life that's just like, oh my gosh, that's the funniest memory ever, that's okay. Because what we're actually looking for are the relatable circumstances, which are oftentimes considered depressing or sad or scary or shocking, right? Or sometimes very funny, if you're one of the lucky people who do have extremely funny things happen to you all the time. Life gives us enough content on a daily basis that we will have something to write about and it will be relatable, right? Now, I say this to kind of open up the floor to this idea that the other thing a lot of people don't realize about stand-up, and I always try to encourage people to do this when it comes to stand-up, is that we want to start with the truth and build up. Stand-up is best, in my opinion, when it is creative nonfiction, when we start with something that truly happened to us, and then we elaborate from there, and then we build the details from there, right? Technically, every story that we ever tell anyone, especially if it's our side of the story, whether it's like an argument with somebody or a wreck we were in or why we don't talk to somebody anymore or a breakup that we had, is always creative nonfiction, right? There's rarely ever a time where you're telling somebody your side of a story and you're not just accidentally leaving certain details out that aren't important, right? Or like you just happen to change the way that they responded to you when you're quoting someone, maybe an argument you had. So we do creative nonfiction every day. And that's what stand-up comedy is, right? Now, you can, if you wanted to, entirely make it up. I mean, you could. It's not illegal. It's not against the law. But here's why we don't necessarily want to do that. One, like I said, life gives you so many instances that unless you like die, unless you're dead, you shouldn't run out of content that life has given you. But also, for example, you decide to write a set, right, about a time that you were in a bar and you saw a man and a woman having an argument, right? And you go up to the guy and you give him the what for, and you cuss him out, right? And you defend her honor, and you get in a fight and you beat the shit out of this guy, right? And you throw him out of the bar and everyone cheers for you and they buy you a drink and it's an amazing story, right? I mean, that's cool, right? But the likelihood that anyone especially in this group of people that I'm looking at right now, can relate to this story of like beating someone up in a bar and being triumphant, pretty slim, right? Now, if you tell the truth, and the truth is that you were at the bar that night, right? And you saw this lady and this guy arguing. So you decide to go up and give him the what for, right? Tell him to stop disrespecting this lady. And then she turns on you and starts yelling at you because you're not minding your own business. And then he turns on you and starts yelling at you because this is his girlfriend and he's having a conversation with her. And why would you get in their business? And they're both yelling at you. And then you inherently start a bar fight, and then you get thrown out by security, right? And everybody hates you because you're nosy and you're loud and you started. And basically all you were trying to do was help the situation, and it did not go well. A lot more people can relate to trying to be helpful and failing, right? Even though I've never been in a bar fight, I can say with all honesty that every single solitary time I try to do the right thing, it makes things worse. It makes things way worse, right? So that's why we start with the truth, because the more honest you are being, the more that somebody else in the audience is going like, oh, like I know how that feels. Like I've been there, right? Does anybody have any questions so far? What questions do we have? Nothing. It's cool that I can like see you, so you can just like shake or not. Okay, great. Perfect. There are 3 main types of relatability that we're aiming for when we're doing stand-up or coming up with content. And this material advice that I'm giving you, it counts for stand-up, it counts for storytelling, it counts for writing. This has been pretty solid advice, I feel like, that has worked in various aspects of life, not just stand-up. But I feel like it definitely helps with stand-up a lot. 3 types of relatability. First type is just the basic definition of relatability. They relate because the same thing happened, right? So maybe you're telling a set that you wrote, you're telling a joke about a car wreck that you were in, right? The likelihood that somebody in the audience watching you or listening to your podcast or watching your YouTube video, the likelihood that they have also been in a car wreck is really high, right? Even though the circumstances under which they had their wreck is different and the car was different and they may have been in a different state on a different day at a different time, they're going to relate because they'll be like, oh, I've been there. That sucks, right? The second type of relatability is very similar, and it's that they relate in that something similar happened to them and it reminds them of something, but it wasn't the same exactly, right? So maybe I do a set about getting divorced, right? And Brian here has never been married, so statistically he has also never been divorced. I mean, weirder things have happened, but I'm just talking statistics. So he doesn't relate necessarily to the divorce aspect, right? But he has been through, say, a really, really bad breakup. Like maybe he lived with a girlfriend, so they broke up and they still had to divide everything in half and they still had to figure out custody with the dog, and it was still very heartbreaking, right? And maybe my divorce in my set was instigated by cheating and his girlfriend cheated on him. So he relates on a lot of levels, but not the exact same. He still doesn't know what it's like to be divorced, right? But he gets it. He's like, oh, those feelings, I feel those. Right? And then the third type of relatability is my personal favorite, and I love milking this one to death, and maybe it makes me a masochist. I don't know, haven't figured it out, is when they relate because they are so glad they are not you, right? When you can tell a story from your life that makes everyone leave the audience being like, oh, but I'm feeling so much better about myself because, I mean, at least I'm not that person. Right? Like I thought I was bad, but at least I'm not them. At least I'm not Mickey over there in the corner, right? Because the story was just so embarrassing. Exactly. So that is my favorite type of relatability, right? I'm one of those people where I will think of the last thing that I ever want anyone to ever find out about me, and then I immediately monetize it, right? Because you can't be blackmailed if you put it on the internet yourself, right? Just saying. People can't call you something you already called yourself, right? And what I also like about those kinds of sets, the kind of set where people are like, oh no, no, and you go, oh, but it gets worse, ladies and gentlemen, it gets worse, and the whole set just derails. My favorite part about those is they can also be teaching moments, right? You can take something that happened to you that you genuinely hope never happens to anyone else, and you can, through comedy, teach us how to learn from your mistakes. So anytime that you can come up with a stand-up set that is also a teaching moment, you can like sneakily, secretly teach us a lesson while also making us laugh. That's a really good thing, right? And that's also why we try to stick to the truth, because if I'm telling you a true story about something humiliating and cringeworthy that I did, maybe in high school, my face is still going to turn a little bit pink, right? I'm still going to break out in maybe a little bit of a sweat. Whenever I am telling a story that's really, really embarrassing and cringeworthy, I start to laugh. Not because I think it's funny, but because I literally can't believe what I did. Just like that exact laugh. I'll be like, guys, I promise you, this is not the worst part of the story. And people really relate to that. They love that, right? People love experiencing those moments with you, especially when at the end of the day, they get to go home and sleep perfectly well at night because they didn't do what you did, right? They feel better about who they are as people because they're not you. Does that make sense so far? Or does anything I said not make sense? Good stuff.